Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. You can say just about anything when you're on the left, so long as you toe the party line and you walk in lockstep with hive mind. For 4 years, the hive mind of the left was obsessed with destroying Donald Trump, orange man bad. So during those 4 years, you could say anything you wanted to about Trump. You could say anything you wanted to about his family and get away with it. You would be actually celebrated. It didn't matter if you were lying. It didn't matter how despicable or grotesque your words or actions were. So here's a quick sample of some of the rhetoric and behavior that was tolerated. Watch.
A few years ago, ideas that we talked about were thought to be fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas. Those ideas are now mainstream.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country.
One way you get rid of Trump is a crashing economy, so please bring on the recession.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
I'm going to say one thing. Trump.
So edgy. Ooh. That was the kind of rhetoric that was mainstreamed by cringe Democrats, and nobody lost their job. Most were celebrated for it. Now, fast forward to a Southwest pilot, literally a pilot for Southwest Airlines, saying, "Let's go, Brandon," over the intercom system on a recent flight. So that pilot is now apparently, reportedly, being investigated by Southwest Airlines for saying these horribly offensive words, "Let's go, Brandon." Why? Because the left is insane. They can't handle dissent. They actually, that phrase has been described as being vulgar. I kid you not. These are people who crocheted vaginal hats. See, the left is forever punishing, canceling, and harassing anybody who gets out of line or goes off script. So right now, the script the hive mind demands fealty towards is that Joe Biden's doing an amazing job, best president ever. So unfortunately for the hive mind, Biden is doing a horrible job. It's the worst start to any presidency, I think probably maybe in American history. The polls show it. Americans are speaking out about it. And "Let's go, Brandon" is the de facto rallying cry now. Now, I should back up just a little bit because in case you missed it, "Let's go, Brandon" is now a world famous meme and also a song that displaced Adele even, that got started at a NASCAR event. So here's the original video. Here's the original story of what happened. So NASCAR driver Brandon Brown, there he is. There's the original video. He won the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Talladega, and he was being interviewed by a reporter from NBC. During the interview, the crowd is very clearly chanting Joe Biden. And now this chant has been spontaneously breaking out at sporting events across the country, concerts, you name it, doesn't matter, right, left, center. This time it happened on live television at a NASCAR event. And so here's the original as to what happened. Just to recap, watch.
As you can hear the chants from the crowd. "Let's go, Brandon."
Oh my gosh, it's the best. Let's go, Brandon. Now that moment seemed to crystallize everything wrong with legacy press and its interference. Kind of just became this avatar, right? Always running defense for the Biden presidency. And it was perceived as real-time gaslighting of America. The crowd is not saying, "Let's go, Brandon." It's clearly expressing disgust with the president in very clear terms. But the reporter, I don't know, did she have trouble hearing, or was it a hive mind thing that doesn't tolerate any dissent against the king, right? Quickly tries to cover it up. Maybe she could have done that. I'm willing to give her a benefit of the doubt. She might have been thinking, "Let's go, Brandon," so that they didn't get fined by the FCC. But still, F Joe Biden magically becomes "Let's go, Brandon." And it's actually perfect because now all ages can say it. And that meme perfectly encapsulates the times through which we're living. "Let's go, Brandon" is now instantly, it's famous. It's impossible to suppress, even though they've been trying to ban it everywhere, literally on TikTok especially. Of course, that's run by commies. It trended on Twitter. There's a song that made it to number 1, 2, 4, and 5 by Bryson Gray. This dude unseated Adele in their first week that her new song "Go Easy on Me" came out. Watch.
Hey, let's go, Brandon. I keep a drum like I'm Nick Cannon. Hey, let's go, Brandon. Pandemic ain't real, they just planned it. Hey, let's go, Brandon. When you ask questions, they start banning. Hey, let's go, Brandon. Hey.
I mean, beat Adele. That's insane. Now, this is extremely frustrating for the leftist hive mind. And it's a total disaster. A saying like this with such cultural cash that violates their speech codes is gone viral. It's the worst scenario for the left because they're powerless to stop it. It's like whack-a-mole. right? Too many people are saying it to hit all of them. So normally the left can cancel one person at a time, but what do you do when half of a nation is chanting this phrase? Quick, says the left, we have to make an example out of someone. We need a poster child for what happens when you have wrong think and somebody runs afoul of wrong speech. So, when they say, let's go, Brandon, there has to be punishment. So fast forward again to the Southwest pilot. He decided to utter the forbidden phrase on a Southwest flight. Now, apparently, some snowflake progressive reporter who got a CC assignment by the bathroom and was in a bad mood decided to complain on Twitter.com. And by the way, it was just her take that he said this. I mean, literally, where are all the other journalists investigating? Why are they even investigating it in the first place? I thought the lesson was if you don't like how something's going, you just make your own, right? Create your own plane, fly your own damn plane, make your own airlines, right? So rather than take the pilot aside, which she did try to do because she tried to get into the locked cockpit. That's kind of terrorist behavior, just FYI, Merrick Garland. That's actual terrorist behavior. Southwest has now initiated a formal investigation because Southwest just has to jump when the rage mob says yes. They have to prostrate themselves before the left, like all corporations. So here's part of a statement from the incident from Southwest. They say, quote, Southwest does not condone employees sharing their personal political opinions while on the job, serving our customers, blah, blah, blah. One of their one perspective should not be interpreted as the viewpoint. Well, good for them. And they continue. They say, Southwest is conducting an internal investigation, blah, blah, blah. We'll address the situation with the employee involved and, blah, blah, blah. It's unacceptable to, opinionate while you're flying. I do like how they said that they're not going to fire the guy, even though everybody else on the left is saying that he should be fired. Honestly, I think that it was kind of like a biscuit that Southwest threw to the rage mob just to shut him up, right? So truthfully, I mean, yeah, sure, we should keep politics out of things. I mean, just don't be a D-bag about it, right? I mean, I really don't care if somebody has an opinion, but if you're like an athlete, I'm there to watch you like perform in whatever sport you chose to make $1 million in. If you're, Hollywood awards ceremony, just give out your stupid little trophy for the movie that nobody saw, whatever. So we understand why Southwest would want the same, right? But for the last 4 years, we couldn't escape politics from the left and nowhere. It didn't matter where we went. We couldn't get away from it. You couldn't watch a game. You couldn't go to a movie. You couldn't watch an award. Not that anybody watched award shows. You couldn't go anywhere without getting some kind of progressive lecture, even kiddie cartoons or a demonstration, anything. And the left usually was pretty vulgar about it. Even CEOs got in on the action, sensing they would be celebrated for going after Trump. So they joined the fray. And the truth is the left is busy politicizing every last corner of America. But oh my gosh, look what happens when that political pendulum swings even the slightest bit the other way. They lose their mind and reach for their smelling salts. An investigation is needed, Southwest says. It's so serious. Someone said, let's go, Brandon. We have to get to the bottom of this. Oh my gosh, I do not have enough middle fingers to give the people that are saying that this guy needs to get fired. Look, they're going after this pilot just because he said, let's go, Biden on the intercom. Golly. Well, Southwest, I can save you some time and money on the investigation. Maybe. Just maybe what the pilot said has something to do with the fact that you're about to lay off hundreds of your loyal pilots because they won't get an injection of solution. And why do they have to get an injection? Because the administration is pressuring corporations with a press release and corporations are caving to it. Now, Southwest loves to talk about how much they love their employees, but they have that little heart pin that they like to wear. I mean, literally the airfield here is called Love Field. But despite all the love, employees really aren't feeling it. After dutifully serving during the pandemic, only to discover that Southwest will now hang them out to dry and side with the administration? Really, will you guys? Come on. Never mind if they've, if any of these pilots actually had coronavirus and they have natural immunity, you have to get injected anyway because natural immunity doesn't exist unless it's vaccine induced, right? Injection induced. I mean, you have people who could lose their entire careers. So I wouldn't be actually surprised if the pilot who said, let's go, Brandon, isn't loving him some Biden right now. The guy behind the plan to cause millions of healthcare workers, police, corporate employees, and firemen to lose their jobs. So not only is this story a demonstration of the double standard constantly at work in America, say things the left likes, you're good to go. Say something wrong think, wrong speak, you're going to get canceled. You can even grovel for forgiveness, but it's not about forgiveness. It's about destruction. You'll lose your job, your livelihood, everything. The story of the Southwest pilot who dared to say, "Let's go, Brandon," over the intercom also illustrates the asymmetrical nature of politics in America. Because you can riot for a year, burn, loot, and murder entire city blocks, injure thousands and harm police, kill people all in the name of BLM and Marxism, and BLM gets its name painted on streets in New York and the basketball court in the NBA. Hollywood stars even send money to bail out rioters and looters. Our own VP even promoted a bailout fund for rioters and looters. And you riot once in the Capitol like an idiot, unarmed, and nobody dies except the one unarmed woman who was shot by somebody who didn't know what was even behind his target. And what? You get solitary confinement, your Miranda rights are suspended, and it's used as a way to characterize the entirety of the right as terrorist. But oh my gosh, let's go, Brandon. This also shows how laughably out of touch the left is with the American public. Listen to this headline, or check this headline from NPR. It sounds like clueless parents that had their ears to the bedroom door of their rebellious teenager, and they overheard some like new slang word, and then they finally figured out what it meant. So this is NPR sounding like the church lady with their little stodgy neo-Puritan tweet this last weekend. Check it. They write, "No one is really cheering on a guy named Brandon. Great job, Grandma. Thanks for saying the obvious. Instead, the phrase is used in conservative circles in place of a more vulgar message directed at President Biden." Okay, boomer. And what's with the pearl clutching? I mean, this is, by the way, this is the side that crocheted vagina hats. Y'all wore vaginal hats. Like, if you really thought your lady bits looked like that, you need to see an OBGYN. These are the same people that had slut walks. And now all of a sudden you're all freaking out because some pilot said, "Let's go, Brandon." Oh my gosh. Are we to believe that the left is suddenly offended by vulgarity? Like old man De Niro says F Donald Trump on national television, but that's not vulgar. You have a Southwest pilot say, "Let's go, Brandon," and oh my gosh, it's vulgar. Suddenly they turn all into Southern Baptists. Oh, how stiff do all of you people sound? The left is becoming more neo-Puritan than the actual Puritans, which at least they had an ethos, right? But suddenly now we're to believe that they're allergic to vulgarity. The left, right? The folks who stuck pornography in school libraries, the folks who held up severed heads of Trump and actually made videos of him being shot, folks talking about rioting and looting. Remember, mostly peaceful protest as being the voice of the unheard. And again, hey, leftist press, the party raging around, "Let's go, Brandon." It's just the biggest meme in the universe at the moment. But strangely, it's actually Legacy Press, which is 100% progressive. That's just apparent. Well, they've ignored it. They've known what it is. Now they actually have to write about it. And that kind of demonstrates, too, how detached from the reality on the ground that the press actually is. Take this hot take from some CNN analyst. Just marinate in the stupidity of this, Cynthia. Here's her tweet about the Southwest pilot saying, "Let's go, Brandon." She writes, quote, "As an experiment, I'd love for a Southwest pilot to say 'Long live ISIS' before taking off. My guess is that 1, the plane would be immediately grounded, 2, the pilot fired, and 3, a statement issued by the airline within a matter of hours," end quote. So this Cynthia analyst believes that a Southwest pilot innocuously saying, "Let's go, Brandon," over the intercom is the same as saying, "Long live ISIS." Wow. I mean, this is like something, this is like one of the worst hot takes I think I've ever seen ever. How could this CNN Cynthia draw that comparison? I don't know, because it's part of the hive mind stuff. And when you're part of the hive mind, you can't think. You can only say things that are approved by other leftists. The only thing that the hive mind allows is that Joe Biden is doing an amazing job. So see, that's why "Let's go, Brandon" seems like it's the equivalent to that pundit of saying "Long live ISIS." And the Southwest pilot, he should be fired immediately. Wow. I mean, that's insane. This is the hive mind mindset that you see at some of these cable networks, right? You can't even work in some mainstream media today unless you think exactly as the leftist hive mind tells you to, like Glenn Greenwald and Bari Weiss and many others can tell you. Now, you'd think that given the implosion of legacy press like CNN and MSNBC with ratings and viewership being in the toilet that they would get a clue, but they don't, because approval from the leftist hive mind is what they crave, even if it means their own destruction. The most important thing they can do is never stray from party line, never question anything, because that's apparently questioning the administration. That's actually the sole job of Peter Doocy of Fox News. Doocy is one of the very, very few journalists, and I think maybe the only one in the White House press corps that in these press briefings who actually ever asks some tough questions. But if you have people on the left who ever venture beyond their hive mind, they discover that America is unhappy with this administration. They have buyer's remorse. Told you. Uncle Joe from Scranton has gone missing, if he ever existed at all. Was that really worth it, as a replacement for the mean tweets? No, cantankerous old Joe Biden. He intends to be the most progressive president in our lifetime. We have taxation coercion, weaponizing federal health and intelligence agencies, blaming half of America for the pandemic, purging anyone who dissents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He feels nothing for all of these people that seem to be horribly affected by his policies. Otherwise, he wouldn't be full steam ahead. So people are letting him know the only way that they know how. Let's go, Brandon. And the more that hive mind buzzes and tries to shut it down, the louder it grows. Check this new meme that went viral on social media yesterday.
LGB.
Stay safe.
LGB.
Everywhere. I go.
LGB.
What it means.
I don't know. LGB.
Whatever it is.
LGB.
Kamala, help me, please. Please.
Alrighty then.
I like you.
So great. I love that. That's so great. You got to watch the whole video because there's so many. Somebody did that, and God bless the internet. This is what the internet is for. So all of this sort of cultural upheaval against the Biden administration, this is very, very key. And now the only question is, will the administration turn up this coercion to try to suppress people like this pilot, right? Are they going to listen to, they're not going to listen to what America's going to say. I'm not even going to pose that for the sake of continuing this monologue because it's not going to happen, right? If the past actions of this White House, and actually this guy as a candidate, is any indication of the future, I think we all know the answer. So let's go, Brandon. Coming up, Consumers Research is calling out BlackRock's close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Will Hild, who is the executive director of Consumers Research, joins me next to discuss. Keep it here. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal and inflation is skyrocketing. Instead of following the former president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, Biden wants to tax corporations and pass trillion-dollar bills we can't pay for. It's time for you to take proactive steps to protect your wealth and retirement by investing in gold and precious metals, and Legacy Precious Metals can help. Washington continues to print money to pay for their outrageous bills, but all that does is devalue your dollar. Gold offers a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. The folks at Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals, and they have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful info at legacypminvestments.com. Welcome back. It's no secret that countless American institutions have sold out to the Chinese Communist Party, but one of the most concerning has been a big O asset manager that we've talked about before, BlackRock. Now, in case you're unfamiliar, BlackRock is a major investment company based in New York with very anti-American but yet pro-China tendencies. Check out this new ad from Consumers Research that exposes the company's deep ties to China.
BlackRock, the biggest American money manager. Where are they investing your money? China, pouring in billions, propping up Chinese communist leaders, putting money into surveillance companies used by the Chinese military. Even left-wing billionaire George Soros knows BlackRock is harming U.S. national security. CEO Larry Fink loves to tell Americans how to live, but he negotiated against America, sucking up to China. BlackRock, taking your money, betting on China.
Golly, Will Hild is the executive director of Consumers Research who produced that ad, and he's with us now. Will, good to see you. Thank you for your time. When I first heard, when I was first watching this campaign that you all have, just raising awareness, because I don't think a lot of people know this about BlackRock. I mean, they might be aware of it, but they don't really know all of this relationship with the CCP, with China, all of this. When you have George Soros come out, and I was kind of shocked because I thought Soros would immediately be in bed with all of this. I mean, he pretty much is a Marxist. And when he raises red flags about this, I don't know if he's doing it because they're a competitor or what, that really got my attention. So tell us a little bit about BlackRock, because the last time they started making a lot of waves was when conservatives realized how much real estate BlackRock was purchasing, buying up all of these houses, and everyone was thinking, okay, well, there goes the American dream of home ownership. And now we hear about their ties to the CCP. What can you tell us about this?
Absolutely. Well, the key to the matter is that BlackRock here in the States hamstrings U.S. corporations, constantly bullying them with regard to bean counting, race and gender on their boards, diversity quotas, pushing them to divest sometimes of their main product in the case of oil and gas exploration. But in China, it's a very different story. They're pouring billions upon billions of dollars of investment into companies over there that do not meet the same requirements that they have here in the United States. And so what is effectively happening is that they are aiding the economy of our biggest geopolitical rival and adversary overseas at the same time that they're hamstringing U.S. corporations here domestically. And it is doubly bad. One, they're putting investors' money at risk. Many American pensions are actually being managed, at least in part, by BlackRock. But in addition, they're creating the cost of goods, making them go up here in the United States, including energy, which we know is an ingredient in pretty much every good or service. And so at a time when American consumers are having to tighten their belts, this company is out there aiding our adversary and making consumer goods more expensive.
Which is insane. I mean, especially considering, like when you were talking about when the ad mentions like a lot of the technology that is like I know that there's a Huawei loophole that's being incorporated, and that now Congress is, even after Trump was so against Huawei and was shutting them down, now apparently we're catering to them. I mean, that all really factors into national security. And I think it's easy for everyone, Will, to focus on, cheap items that are made by China, and everybody talks about, the supply chain. And I get that. That's a huge thing as well. But this is not just that supply chain. This is also, as you said, energy, it's property, it's homeownership. And this is, these are huge ingredients that can affect just, our stock market as well. And it really, is it just me, or has this not been on the radar of a lot of people on the right?
No, it hasn't, and it hasn't been on the radar of the American consumer, and that's why we put together this ad campaign. And I should note that this is an ongoing ad campaign just against BlackRock, to educate the American consumer on the influence of this company, both domestically and abroad. And as you noted, it goes farther. Obviously, there are issues with offshoring and what that does to the American economy, but this goes farther than that. For example, BlackRock is reportedly an investor in two Chinese companies, one called iFlyTech, one called Hikvision. Both of these are surveillance technology companies which have been blacklisted by the American government. You cannot legally trade with them as an American citizen. Yet BlackRock is an investor in them. And the reason that you cannot trade with them is that these are Chinese surveillance companies that are actually used to oppress Chinese minorities and Chinese citizens within that country. And they are effectively military technology. So you have American investment dollars through BlackRock being invested in companies that could very well are already being used to oppress Chinese citizens. If we end up in some sort of more kinetic conflict with China, they could be ultimately put to a military use against the United States.
Yeah, and that's incredibly interesting. And I don't know, I know that we all love private businesses and we love private business freedom, but at the same time, this is a country that's challenging. If this was a free society challenging another free society, that would be one thing. But this is a communist nation that, we're already seeing some of the effects of that with tech behavior. For instance, TikTok and LinkedIn, there have been people who've been corporately censored from expressing certain views because it would anger China, whether it's available online in China, et cetera, or because of their ownership. But that's incredibly troubling. Is this something that you would have Congress take action on? Because, if investment dollars are going to entities that, you couldn't do business with, I couldn't do business with just because of their hostility towards the United States, how can investment dollars, what's the loophole that allows that?
Well, I'm not going to suggest a specific policy response, but absolutely the point of this campaign is to draw attention to this issue. And so to the extent Congress or at the state level, one of the things that I alluded to that I'm going to repeat here is there is a large amount of pension money at the state level, at the federal level, being managed by BlackRock. So it goes beyond just the idea of like, hey, companies are in the free market, they can produce goods. This is people's pensions that are being put at risk doubly. One, by being invested in a company that doesn't have the same legal protections for investors that we have here in the States. But in addition, they're taking money that should be going to American companies and building up the American economy, and it's helping to build up our adversary. So I don't know what the exact policy response is, but absolutely government officials should be looking at this issue and really taking it seriously.
It's just creepy to see how far the tentacles of the CCP actually are entwined in American society and American finance too. I mean, the other big headline is related to BlackRock is the purchase of all this real estate, and of course, all of this comes back to its relationship with the CCP, which that now it makes a lot of sense to see how. Last question for you: how long this relationship that BlackRock has had with the CCP? How long has this? I mean, how long has this relationship spanned?
This is a decades-long relationship. It goes back many years. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock specifically, is very cozy with the Chinese Communist Party. He has advised them on how to restructure their pension fund. Recently, BlackRock was just given the first wholly foreign-owned mutual fund, the right to run the first wholly owned foreign mutual fund in China, which just speaks to that coziness of the relationship. And in fact, Larry Fink in an interview said that, markets actually prefer totalitarian governments. They don't like democracies. They're messy. Well, that's news to me. I mean, America has been the best place for capital formation for the last 100 years. I don't know where he's getting that information. What I think it means is that Larry Fink likes totalitarian governments because once you cozy up to them and do their bidding, they can hand you out favors like they've gotten in China from the Communist Party. So I think that speaks to the coziness of their relationship.
Yeah, and to contradict Larry Fink, doesn't look like China's economy is doing so good right now. Everything's slowing since consumerism has been slowing because the lockdown and everything else. Unbelievable.
That's
Will Hild, we're glad that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Dana, because there's a specific instance where U.S. Investors are really put at risk here by their coziness. The biggest property developer in China, Evergrande, is currently going through what looks like a slow motion train wreck of a default. And the biggest buyer, one of the biggest buyers of their bonds, has been BlackRock. So there's American dollars that have been put at risk by that investment. And what's more, as I spoke to earlier about the dangers of investing in China, where we don't have the same equal protection under the law, China has stated at the beginning of this default that they are going to treat domestic holders, meaning Chinese holders, of Evergrande's debt differently in bankruptcy than foreign holders like BlackRock. So any investor that's got money with BlackRock, and that may include, pension funds that have, their money has been used to buy this debt, are going to be farther back in line than they should be because BlackRock was not paying attention to this political risk of being treated differently as a foreign.
Wow. That's unbelievable. That's just great. Unbelievable. I'm glad that you're watching out for this, and I'm glad that you're also telling people about this and raising awareness of it. More people need to be aware, honestly. Will Hild with Consumers Research. Will, as always, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So coming up, Congress just secured a major win against Communist China through the Secure Equipment Act. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise joins us next to break down this bill. Stay here. Black Rifle Coffee Company is not your typical coffee company. Black Rifle Coffee develops their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus they learned as military members. They've spent thousands of hours tasting, sourcing, and perfecting coffee from across the world. Being founded and operated by veterans, Black Rifle Coffee knows what a quality cup of coffee means to active duty troops that are away from home for the holidays. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to supporting all who serve. With every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. In 2020 alone, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to soldiers overseas, law enforcement officers, and of course firefighters as well on the West Coast, and medical workers during the COVID-19 response. This November, for every cup of coffee you purchase, that purchase you make, a bag of their limited edition holiday roast is going to be sent to service members overseas for Christmas delivery, so they'll get it Christmas morning. So help support the cause. Visit blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV and check out the freshest coffee in America. blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV gets you 20% off coffee, apparel, and gear, plus 20% off your first month of the Coffee Club. So welcome back. We've talked a bit so far about the dangers of the CCP with China, the Communist Party, and now we have Congress actually taking bipartisan action. Can you believe this? It's actual bipartisan action. There's common ground after all, to prevent interference from the CCP. It's called the Secure Equipment Act, and it was introduced in part by House Republican Whip Steve Scalise. He joins us now. Congressman, thank you so much for being here and breaking this down for us. Always good to see you. So tell people, first off, I'm amazed that this had such bipartisan support that it passed, so that's a huge win. Thank you for looking out for the American people. But tell us about this, and why American people need to be so incredibly concerned about this, because I don't think that this has been on a lot of folks' radar.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. And this is one of those bills that we worked on for a long time, a few years in the making. Anna Eshoo, a Democrat from California, has been working on this with me for a number of years. And we've been concerned about, as data flows across our networks, people use the internet in so many ways. And, you know, with so many smart devices, you're not even realizing how much of your data is moving across networks, some of which are owned by foreign owned entities, including Chinese companies. And so we started working with the FCC and a few years ago passed a law to make the FCC identify companies that are national security threats. And they did that. But one of the flaws that we saw in that law was that even though a company would be identified as a national security threat, they could still sell and be licensed in the United States. And so that's when I went to work to put this bill forward. And Anna Eshoo, like I said, was the co-sponsor of this bill. And it says if a company ends up on the FCC's list as a company that is a national security threat to America, then they cannot be licensed by the FCC. And so there are now 5 companies that are listed as national security threats, all Chinese owned. And so this bill says they can no longer be licensed by the FCC, and it protects American data for those Americans that are sending data across networks. They will no longer be worried that these companies will be getting control of their data.
Yeah, and that's incredibly important because this, I mean, we had this fight with Huawei with former President Trump, and it seemed for a long time that he and you and others in the administration were the only people that were trying to voice concern about what China was doing with these companies. And what gets me, Congressman, is that we even have to pass an act to make sure that we are not allowing businesses affiliated with a communist regime that would love to see American destruction, that we're not allowing them to work here in the United States and be licensed to do so. I mean, it seems like an obvious thing to have happen. And I'm actually, like I said, I'm surprised that enough people in Congress recognized that it was the threat that it was and voted accordingly. I mean, I guess that I'm not sure what you could attribute that to, but I was actually surprised, very much surprised at that. Now, this obviously, I mean, this is passed and this is, but I feel like I know that the administration was still considering maybe perhaps licensing certain things through Huawei, and that there's still threats out there from different aspects of Chinese communication, correct?
Yeah, and this would look, Huawei is one of the 5 companies, as well as ZTE. Those are probably the 2 most prominent companies that still have a lot of equipment out there where Americans' data runs across those networks. They would no longer be able to be licensed by the FCC. Again, because they're listed as national security threats. And this took a lot of work, and I guess it probably doesn't get the attention it should, because it was Republicans and Democrats working together. And as much as so many things appear toxic, there are still some things where we're able to put these coalitions together. And this took a lot of work of all of us coming together. And like I said, credit to Anna Eshoo, who really took this seriously as well. She represents part of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I've got a computer science degree. We've worked on technology issues together in the past, and we know how much of a threat this is because, look, people use so many different forms of technology. And, you know, maybe your smartphone is the main device you use, but there's a lot of others. TVs are now smart devices too. And the backbones of a lot of these networks are companies you've never heard of, and yet your data is running across those networks. And this just says, look, the FCC regulates all this. If the FCC identifies any company as a national security threat, they can now, under this bill, no longer get licensing from the federal government. So it protects the data of Americans, whether they realize their data is running across those networks or not.
And that's the thing, Congressman, to you and I, this seems like a simple issue, and we obviously want to make sure that our data is protected. For the average American that's out there who, you know, they're busy working 9 to 5 to pay whatever Joe Biden's going to tax them with here coming up, heaven forbid if it passes. They're trying to keep a roof over their heads. How do you break it down and make that very personalized towards them? They might say, well, I don't care if somebody from CCP gets my information. Well, maybe they will if it's like, you know, bank information from a transaction that's made or something else.
Right. Credit card information, social security information, breaches of your personal data. You know, you sure would care about it if your credit card was stolen and you called and said, cancel the card. Well, what if you didn't even know that credit card was stolen and charges might pop up? And again, the Chinese Communist Party has access. They can go to these companies and say, you've got to give us the data if you're a Chinese-owned company. and you don't even know it. You might have an Apple phone and you're running it across Verizon or AT&T or some other network. You don't realize that at some point it may be going through a Huawei or a ZTE device, and you don't even realize it. Well, now, if they're listed as a national security threat, it cannot run across those networks here in America because they can't get licensed by the FCC once this bill is signed into law. But it was passed overwhelmingly in the House, passed unanimously last week in the Senate. Again, didn't get a lot of attention because it was one of those areas where we really did work together on something that I think is a very important national security issue. And it's now going to be going to the president's desk. Hopefully it gets signed quickly so that we can get that extra layer of protection for Americans and their data.
Yeah, one last quick question, not so much related to the tech issue, but it is related to China, and also has to do with the president being at the COP26, I think, the climate thing for the rich snobs that all took their 400 some odd jets up there, up in Glasgow. Congressman, I have to ask you, it was interesting to hear the president say that he wished that China would have contributed a little bit more as it related to the environment and reduction of emissions. And he was talking about the Paris Accords and apologizing to, I guess, all the national leaders assembled for the United States had previously withdrawn from the Paris Accords under former President Trump. I was just curious as to your reaction to this. I mean, at least he did mention China, but to apologize to everyone for the United States removing itself from something that should be a treaty and was not treated as such. I mean, I don't think that he should be apologizing for the United States acting within its own sovereign ability.
Yeah, and instead of the president going to other countries apologizing for America, he should recognize the fact that the United States of America was one of the very few countries that actually reduced our carbon emissions by getting out of the Paris Accord. There's not a single country in Europe that was in compliance with the Paris Accord because it, first of all, exempts China. Russia said they're not participating either. China and Russia are laughing at this conference. And by the way, I'd love to see the carbon footprint of all those private jets flying over to Scotland to tell other people not to use fossil fuels. A lot of irony in that. But again, we were the country that was leading the way on reducing carbon emissions by not being in the Paris Accord. He failed to mention that when he was too busy apologizing for America. It was American technology that reduced our emissions. Now we're literally putting a stranglehold on America's economy. And by the way, it's going to increase global emissions because by exempting China, exempting Russia, you're actually going to send more jobs to countries that emit higher levels of carbon. We should be making more things in America. And oh, by the way, this also increases the cost for families. Inflation in America is already out of control. This makes inflation even worse. And household electricity costs are higher. You're paying more at the pump because of these kind of policies. They're killing pipelines like Keystone in America, but greenlighting the Russian pipeline. President Biden says don't drill in America, but then he begs OPEC to drill more and produce more, which, by the way, they said they're not going to do, but they emit more carbon. Right. If Saudi is drilling for oil, they're emitting a lot more carbon in America because we have higher standards. Stop bashing America. Yeah. Stop beating up on America. Make more things in America. We were leading the way in reducing emissions through American technology. Don't hurt our economy and then give a gift to Russia and China.
Yeah, exactly. He should have just said everyone needs to match what we've been doing and then walk out. That's it. That's all he needed to say. Congressman Steve Scalise, appreciate what you do.
Thank you. And do it on Zoom.
It would have been.
All those jets over there. They tell kids not to go to the classroom. But then they want to fly their private jets to a conference where they say don't use fossil fuels. Again, a lot of irony in that. China and Russia are laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, oh, completely. They're really enjoying this. They got a lot of propaganda out of this for sure. Congressman Steve Scalise, as always, thank you, sir.
Great being with you. Thanks.
All right, folks, coming up, the insane hypocrisy that you just heard the congressman talking about of these world leaders at the climate summit. Keep it here. If you don't own a home, you have nothing to fear from home title thieves. But if you own a home and you don't guard it with Home Title Lock, you're inviting home title fraud, one of the fastest growing crimes. Cyber thieves around the world know that home values are sky high, and that makes homeowners a target. The crime is scary simple. A cyber thief can forge your name on a property sale form and refile it. And now he's on the deed to your home, and you have no idea that you are a victim. Then he can take out loans on your home and disappear, leaving you to prove to police that you didn't commit fraud. Home Title Lock can put a virtual barrier around your home's title, and the instant they detect tampering, they help shut it down. If you have equity in your home, guard it with your life. Visit HometitleLock.com, register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim, and enter code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HometitleLock.com. If you haven't noticed yet, the elite have decided that they want to radically transform society, and not just here in America, but the world over. And to do that, they need to change the way you live. But you can't just announce that you're taking away people's freedoms. That will never work. So instead, you have to create panic and fear. And the first panic was coronavirus. And with coronavirus, individual rights and freedoms in the West vanished overnight. Places like Canada and Australia are completely transformed, shells of themselves, replaced by authoritarian rule that resembles something more like that of the CCP. It's all happened so astonishingly fast. And one of the patterns that has emerged is that elite politicians seem to want you scared all the time, but they themselves don't seem very scared at all. And that's why we constantly catch them not wearing their masks. It's blatant hypocrisy, but that's because the fear is just a tool. It's a tool meant to change the way you live. The elites, self-appointed elites, have no intention of giving up their lifestyles at all. Now, case in point, this massive carven, all these, did you see all the, it's like a giant parade of jets, SUVs, buses, cars, all to bring these foreign dignitaries to Scotland for the latest climate summit, COP26. This climate summit is all about hyping the next thing that you should be frightened of, which is non-scientific consensus of man-made global climate change. So global climate change is such an emergency that over 400 private jets were needed to get everyone there immediately. There was no need to carpool to the very important climate change summit when you are a rich person and you do this optically for fun. I mean, this honestly, this is like what rich people do as a hobby. I mean, they can't get normal hobbies like everybody else. They have to do this stuff. So no, all this, any other way of travel is for all of you unwashed masses. Like, we weren't invited, so we have to travel the old-fashioned way. It turns out that the more than 400 private jets carrying world leaders and business executives are going to blast 13,000 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, and the flights are going to produce more global warming gas than 1,600 Scots burned through in a year. It's, yes, of course it's rank climate hypocrisy. Of course it is, and they don't care about it. If the Earth really hung in the balance, these super snotty rich bastards would not be all taking a private jet to Scotland. They would use Zoom like everybody else. There's zero carbon emissions on Zoom calls, right? But the global climate crisis is a tool to change the way you live and not the way the elite live. So they all flew first class in their own private jets. Actually, private jet is pretty much all first class, right? So now the world leaders, when they're not busy showing off their hypocrisy, they're busy listening to Joe Biden apologizing for America. Watch.
I guess I shouldn't apologize, but I do apologize for the fact the United States in the last administration pulled out of the Paris Accords and put us sort of behind the eight ball a little bit.
Of course, Trump pulled out of the Paris Accords because he had every right to. First and foremost, it's unconstitutional. It violates Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution that prevents any of the 50 states from entering into a treaty with a foreign entity. And that's exactly what the Paris Accords require. And every 50 state meet demands that have been placed upon each of these states respectively by a foreign entity, right? It would have put this huge burden on the American economy. And not on the biggest polluter, China. By the way, China never shows up to these climate things. They never show up. They were invited and didn't show up last year. For the first time ever, CCP had Xi Jinping sent a video of remarks. That's it. And China never, ever, ever was included in the Paris Accords. What China always said is that they'll aim to reduce their emissions. But here's the other thing. Do you realize that the United States is the only country that actually has reduced emissions, and that all of the other countries that talk a great game about climate and everything else haven't even come close to the United States where it concerns emissions? Not the Netherlands, not Germany, not France, nobody else but the United States. And so here you have Joe Biden apologizing and pandering to world leaders. Now, he wasn't done leading from behind, as his mentor, his former President Obama, taught him. Here he is in the COP20 group photo, standing off to the side. He's like barely on the riser. Now, you better believe it's purposeful, because all these people up here, all of these self-appointed elite people that all took their private jets, they want a globalist government, which means a diminished America, and a League of Nations running things instead and trying to borrow the power of a democratically elected president. So that's why Biden can't be at the center of the photo, because it's the old world order. Do you remember all these people bitching when Donald Trump pushed his way into the center of the photo. And do you want to know why Trump pushed his way into the center of the photo? Because this is the United States of America, and he had every right to, as the representative of the people, to push his way to the center of the photo, because none of these people's objectives would be achieved without the United States' participation in this vanity experiment by rich bastards. Not a single objective would be completed if the United States was not into it. Furthermore, most of these entities that are there on those risers, particularly the ones in NATO, would not have any defense against Russia, which was really ultimately the one big reason that NATO was created in the first place. They wouldn't have any defense against Russia were it not for the generosity and welfare of the United States taxpayer. So everyone else can move aside, because the United States should be center in that. And if you don't like it, then make your own policies and make your own defense budget. Isn't that how this works? Now, for these people to get to the New World Order, they have to dilute the importance of national identity and nation states. So maybe it's a little easier to understand what's happening in America now. So now that's why loving the country is not patriotic, but it's like somehow privilege or white supremacist or some other garbage. Nationalism is bad, globalism is good, because globalist government is the goal of these self-appointed elite rat bastards. And that's what they are. I'm not going to apologize for being completely factual, truth-based, and just in offering a factual observation. Then don't be it if you don't like the name of it. Global climate change is on deck in this alarmist bullpen, and they're all ready to transition from the pandemic to climate change emergency. In order to stop the whole world from heating up, they need your money. We're going to paper over the sun. Apparently, that's how that's going to work. And if you don't give us your money, like an old-fashioned hold-up, they're going to die. They're going to say that we're all going to die soon, that the polar bears are going to die. I thought all the polar bears were supposed to be dead. Penguins are supposed to be dead. All the ice caps are going to melt. Santa's house is going to melt. Where are the elves going to go? I mean, just like crazy, right? But these people are going to live however they want. No masks, flying private, spewing carbon. I mean, on the planes, not when they talk. Living as they please, because they're not afraid of COVID or climate change. What they're afraid of is not being able to control you. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.